Happy Thanksgiving and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks for being with us. We're very thankful for you. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. And we're going to do an open forum today at this hour, an internet open forum. So lots and lots of great questions coming up. But I do want to welcome those who maybe you've never listened to Catholic Answers because, you know, usually you're working at this time or whatever, but your schedule is different today. And so you're catching us. Catholic Answers is an apostolate entirely devoted to explaining and defending the Catholic faith. And if you want to know more about us, you can go to Catholic.com, and you can learn all about us there. Our director of apologetics and evangelization here at Catholic Answers is Tim Staples, and he is our guest this hour. Happy Thanksgiving, Tim.
Happy Thanksgiving, my friend.
It's almost the most wonderful time of the year.
Almost
a couple more days. Advent starts, and we get to do the Advent wreath. And
yes,
I'm thinking that this year the Advent wreath is more important than ever because I think, like we Catholics, we're really into accepting the human being as a sensory creature, you know, dependent on our senses to tell us what's going on. And so we change the colors in the church based on the season and the music. A lot of people aren't going to get to go to Sunday Mass throughout Advent. So I think the Advent candle's the thing.
They really are. And in the Staples household, our kids love the Advent wreath and getting to light the candles, you know?
Yeah.
Because different kids get to light the candle at different times, and they're really into it. You know, as an evangelical, we didn't have any of that.
No.
You know, we didn't have Advent and the seasons and such. And it's kind of like now I look back. Isn't it funny? Because we looked at all those traditions of the Catholic.
Yeah, right.
It's not in the Bible. This is evil, right?
Uh-huh.
And now I wonder, how did I exist without them?
Yeah, because they're very supportive.
They are so supportive of the faith. The entire liturgical calendar is so supportive of the faith, but also of the family, because it really is something that the whole family gets involved in.
You've got time on this Sunday. The 29th is the first Sunday of Advent. And so you got time to head out and get that Advent wreath. It really does make a difference. And this year we're going to need it more than ever. Yeah. I think the main thing people would like to know on Thanksgiving is, are you a dark meat or a light meat person?
I am a white meat guy.
Never would I have guessed it. I had you pegged for dark meat.
I like dark meat when it comes to chicken. But I like light meat when it comes to turkey.
See, now the thing is, you are married to Valerie, who can probably cook a turkey well so that the white meat is not dried out. See, that's my problem, is if I cook the turkey.
Well, you had one of our turkeys.
Yeah.
And was it perfect or what?
That's the thing. It was perfect. So I don't like it because it tastes like chalk if I cook a turkey.
That's what it would have been if it would have been me.
Yeah, but see, that's why you can eat the white meat. All right. A question about Thor starts us off today. By the way, It's an internet open forum this hour with Tim Staples, our director of apologetics and evangelization. All these questions have come to us via the internet. And I don't have names of who sent them, and I'm sorry about that. It's just that in the processing, the names got taken off. But someone sent us a note and asked this: could a pagan god such as Thor really be a demon?
Oh, yeah. That's a really good question. And in fact, St. Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 20, in the context of talking about pagan worship, in verse 20, he says, "No, I imply that what pagans sacrifice, they offer to demons and not to God. And I do not want you to be partners with demons." He's exhorting the Corinthians not to get involved with the pagan worship. And why? Because they're actually worshiping or offering sacrifice to demons. Now, as much as they believe that those gods they're offering sacrifice to are really and truly gods, St. Paul warns us they are not. They are, in fact, demons. And the demons love it when they can get human beings to worship something or someone that is not God.
Yeah, and you see this in the medieval saints who went out among the Germanic people. Like, what's the guy that chops down the great oak tree? Because the people worship the oak tree, and they thought that the God would kill them.
I can't think of
And this saint just goes out with an axe and cuts down the oak tree.
Yes.
It's like, now get over it, worship Jesus. And then they did after that.
That's right.
Because they weren't playing around. Like, you can't have both. You cannot have both.
That's right.
Choose Jesus.
That's right. And yet, at the same time, this is the great mercy of God, isn't it?
Yeah.
That we also know that some of those pagans who are worshiping false gods, objectively speaking, if they're invincibly ignorant and they're truly seeking God the best way they know how, they can be saved.
Sure. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, Si, that's got to drive the devil absolutely crazy. Because I've got them. They're worshiping my false gods. They're worshiping me. And yet they get saved because of God's mercy. Now, of course, that ignorance must be invincible, and there must be some other factors like supernatural faith and perfect charity in their hearts. And in order for them to be saved, which it's kind of a high bar, we need to evangelize everyone, of course, because everyone needs the Eucharist, which is the ordinary means of that is the sacraments in general, the Eucharist in particular, the ordinary means of our sanctification. Everyone is in need of, but in God's great mercy. Thanks be to God. Anyone who honestly seeks him with their whole heart will never be disappointed.
Amen. Amen. But I do think people sometimes also undersell the social significance of the gospel. Like when you think about Germany, for example, before the gospel came, and then 1,000 years of Germany after the gospel came, these are two different worlds. And you'd way rather live in the second world, the one with the gospel.
That's right. And I would put an addendum on that. Look what's happening to our culture post-Christian, right?
Yeah.
When we leave, St. Paul has that graphic depiction of what happens when you leave God, especially having known God, Si.
Yeah, right.
A culture like ours that has been so richly blessed falls right in line with Romans 1, verse 21. Although they knew God, they refused to acknowledge him as God. They refused to give thanks to him as God. And therefore, what happens? We see the decline from verses 21 down to verse 29 there of Romans chapter 1. So it's amazing how we have the gospel bring cultures. As you mentioned, the Germanic peoples. We could talk about my wife's ancestors being Mexican, and she's got Indian in her as well, brought from absolute darkness, human sacrifice, and such, to this glorious light of the gospel that transformed their culture from the inside out. And look what's happening today. Now we see the decline. You'd think we knuckleheaded humans would get it, Si.
No.
When you hang with Jesus, not only do you get everlasting life, but you get sanity, you get peace, you get love, you get joy this side of the veil, and you get an ordered society. But to the degree you leave that, you leave order and sanity and beauty, and you get chaos. Welcome to the Western world today.
Well, which brings us very neatly to our next question, because with people letting go of God, there are more and more atheists around. And this questioner asks, what is the best way to speak to atheists who claim that there is no evidence for faith, especially if they are a relative? It is Thanksgiving. All right. So peace in the home today on Thanksgiving. But
I like to use three. It depends upon the person that you're talking to. There are three of my favorite proofs for actually, one of them is not a proof. It's based on probability, but I think compelling. Two of them are actual proofs, but one, and Si, over the years, I've talked to so many atheists, and I've kind of changed. I used to always, Thomas's 5 proofs were my number one, and that's what I would use. But I've found now Thomas has been moved down to number 3, not to upset any of my Thomas friends.
Wow.
but actually, the first proof that I like to use is rooted in a fellow, Gottfried Leibniz, not a Christian, but an excellent proof rooted in basically the nature of existence itself. And it basically says this, and this is something I have found to work. I remember talking with a kid in a coffee shop, this has been several years ago now, and he kind of got it. He was an agnostic, a student here at a local university. And he
And
kind of
this
got
one
it.
broke through to him.
Yeah,
Oh,
it
okay.
kind of, not that he, except, but you could see the light bulbs go on.
Yes, right.
And it basically says this: when we look at everything that exists, everything, Cy Kellett or Tim Stables, everything, there's only two possibilities when it comes to existence. The existence of everything that exists either comes from itself, that is, its existence is from itself, and therefore that thing would be existence itself. Its existence would be its essence. Its essence would be to exist, right? That is a possibility. Or when we look at things, its existence comes from outside of itself. And there's really not a third option, right?
It seems pretty obvious.
And then what
no?
you do is just say, well, look, when we look at everything in existence, and science has our back on this, we know everything that exists receives its existence from outside itself. Now, to use some fancy philosophical language, we would say that the essence, let's take Cy Kellett, who's sitting there,
Okay.
your nature, you have a human nature. Well, your nature is not existence because it is your nature to receive your existence from something outside of you, right? So your essence is not existence. So we can scratch you off the list of if we want to say, no, Cy Kellett is the source of all being. Nope, he's not.
I can't be,
because
yeah.
he receives his existence outside of himself. But Cy, it's impossible to have an infinite number of beings, or just all of us, everything that's in existence, receiving its existence from outside itself. There must be that being that possesses existence in and of itself. It is existence.
Right.
Otherwise, there couldn't be existence. There can't be just an infinite regress of beings all receiving their existence from outside.
Right.
There must be that being that is, in fact, existence. And I've found that that's simple little proof. It's not that difficult. And, you'll get some pushback here and there, but it's pretty airtight. And that's number one. Number two, I find to be helpful, but it's not a proof for the existence of God. It's based on probability. But I find this to be really effective in our scientific age, because what it does is there are some, and I forget the exact number, 28, 30, what are called cosmological parameters, right?
Oh, yes. Okay, I know where you're going.
Right.
Yeah.
Cosmological parameters. These are, for example, I'll just name 5 of them. The physical forces that undergird all of material existence, right? Like the force, it's called strong nuclear force, right? That keeps protons and neutrons together.
Right.
Then you have weak nuclear force, which enables us to be able to do chemistry. That's how atoms bind with one another and create molecules and that sort of thing. So you have strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, electromagnetic force, and gravity. These are 4, and we could throw in one more called the cosmological constant. This is in fancy terms, the ratio between particles and empty space, like in interstellar and intergalactic space. A lot of folks don't know this, but if you were to take a spaceship out into interstellar space, there's stuff there.
Right. Yeah.
Right? It's sparse. There's not a lot, but there are particles there, and even in intergalactic space. But what's really amazing about this, and again, there's like 28 or 30 of these cosmological parameters that are so finely tuned.
Yeah.
Right. William Lane Craig uses this kind of argumentation famously. Again, not a proof, but it shows that the probabilities involved here when it comes to the existence of God. Because think about this. If we just take one of those roughly 28 or so, and by the way, different scientists have different numbers.
Yeah.
Some of them they put into one.
Right.
There are some who theorize that those 4 force strengths that I mentioned, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, electromagnetic force, and gravity, are actually one force. Some say they're 2 forces. Yeah. Those are guys a lot smarter than I am.
And they'll have to work it out among themselves.
They'll have to work it out. That's right. But let's say there are 4, and then the cosmological constant. And again, there are so many more we could talk about. All of them are so finely tuned. If we just take the one, right? The cosmological constant, which again is the ratio of particles to space in like interstellar and intergalactic space. It is so finely tuned, and there's no necessity here that we're talking about an ordering to 1 times 10 to the 120th power. Okay, which, that number, it's hard for us to fathom this, equates to more than the entire number of atoms in the entire universe. Yeah. Okay? Now, what does this mean? It's ordered to 1 times 10. Well, think of it this way. I read one physicist who said, in order to understand the fine-tuning involved here, imagine a linear dial that stretched across the entire universe, 100 billion light years. One of those old linear dials we used to have on our radios where you turn the dial and the thing goes across like this, right? Imagine it stretching 100 billion light years, right? With 1 millimeter increments.
Yeah.
If you turn the dial just 2 or 3 increments, the universe doesn't exist, all right? I mean, because what happens is if we're adjusting a force, because remember, there's a force involved here in keeping those particles at a particular distance from each other in, let's say, intergalactic space. There's a force involved. If that force was just 2-3 increments stronger, then the force would be too strong for galaxies to be able to form. And if it was they couldn't come together and form. I mean, it's
such a perfectly fine-tuned universe is evidence of an intelligence that made it.
It doesn't prove
no, it's not a proof, but it's very strong evidence.
It's strong evidence of the fact that there is an incredible power out there that created everything that we see in existence. And he would have had to have been, I say he, this power, God, if you will, that everyone knows to be God, would have been infinitely powerful to be able to bring something from nothing, as well as to be able to order this entire universe in the way that we are talking about. So that's just another example of how you can get folks thinking a little bit at the table about, man, there has to be a God here. And then the last one, what I like to do is...
Can I ask you to wait for the last one? Only because I went too long and I didn't time this correctly.
You got it.
I did the clock wrong, so we'll get, this is a good tease. The last one, what you might say to an atheist who claims there's no evidence for faith. The last bit of evidence from Tim Staples right after this.
There's only one. Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Hi, this is Teresa Tomeo, host of Catholic Connection, heard every morning weekdays on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network, wishing you and yours a beautiful and blessed happy Thanksgiving. And remember, as we're reminded in Colossians 3:17, whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of our Lord Jesus, giving thanks through him to God the Father. Happy Thanksgiving.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live on this Thanksgiving, and happy Thanksgiving to you. I hope you're enjoying your Thanksgiving. We have Tim Staples with us this hour. Next hour, our president, Chris Check, will be here, and we're going to talk about the coming of the gospel to the new world. Thanksgiving seems like a good day to talk about that. But right now, we're in the midst of a fascinating question. A caller who wanted to know how to speak to atheists, when, in particular, when the evidence, when what the atheist says is there's no evidence for faith. And so you're giving us some of the evidence to have faith in God.
Yeah, and I moved to number 3, the Thomistic proofs. Not as a put down, obviously. Thomas's are airtight. But I do find those other two are easier for folks to grasp. But what I would like to do, maybe this will help you around the table here, Thanksgiving, but is use Thomas's first, second, and fifth proofs for the existence of God, which really all of Thomas's proofs are rooted in causality.
Oh,
right?
okay.
He begins with the material order and reasons that there must be a cause, but he does it in 5 different ways. And the first is from motion. And there's a couple of things that you need to help folks understand when you're talking about motion. Number one is, what is motion? When Thomas talks about motion, he's thinking in an Aristotelian construct that you have to understand, and it's just basically labeling reality. You know, people can get intimidated by the fancy words, but it's rooted in an understanding that everything that exists possesses potency in as much as it exists in this world of ours. Everything from this cup to Cy Kellett possesses potency. That is the potential either to move, to grow, the potential. Now, I do not have the potency to fly. No matter how hard I flap my arms, it won't work.
Have you tried, though?
I have tried,
Okay,
and I've got a bad shoulder as a result of trying it, right? But everything that exists possesses potency and is in motion in some sense, right? Either has the potential to move or is in motion, right? For example, I can move from here to there. But in order for me to move from here to there, I first have to have the potency to move from here to there. Because if we're talking about the potency to fly, I ain't got it. Right? But to move from here to there, yes, I have that potency. But in order for me to move, and here's where it gets a little bit tricky. Ultimately, I must be moved to act, because everything that is in motion has to be moved. And by the way, this is something that science has our back on. Newton.
Yeah, Newton's laws.
Right? Every object that is at rest must be acted upon by another object that is in motion in order for that object to move. Right? So in order for me to move, ultimately, now you may say, but wait a minute, Tim, you've got the ability to stand up and move. But we're talking about ultimate motion here. I don't have the ability to move myself into being. I don't have the ability ultimately to move myself. I must be moved. And everything in the universe that is in motion must be moved ultimately by another. And that mover must have the perfection of motion already in order to move the other. Again, that's just Newton, right? So we need to understand that as a principle, and then we can say this. We can say then, therefore, everything that is in motion was moved by something else that was already in motion.
Yes.
Well, then here's where causality kicks in. There has to be a first mover that itself was not moved. And why? Because there can't be an infinite number of movers, none of which has the power to be the cause of motion itself. Otherwise, it'd be like coming upon a train or positing a train with infinite cars, no motor, no engine, I should say, but just infinite cars that are moving down a track. Well, we know that's absurd. There has to be the first mover in order for those cars, which don't have the power of motion in each one of them, to move. Well, in this instance, there must be a first mover that itself was not moved at all, but is the cause of all motion. This mover would be what St. Thomas calls pure actuality, right? The first, as Thomas called the unmoved mover, Cy, would have all perfection. There would be no potency, and that's why we first had to explain motion as the reduction of something from potency to actuality. Well, that first mover, that unmoved mover, would have to, by necessity, be pure actuality, no potency whatsoever. This we know to be God.
Yeah.
He would have, in fact, he can't, God, think about this. He can't move from here to there, Si. He can't. Why? Because he's already there. He can't come to know something. Why? Because he already knows it. There's no potency whatsoever in this we know to be God. And then the next two, rooted in that same principle of causality, but in different aspects. Number two is cause itself. Everything that we see in existence is caused to be by something else. Thomas says it would be absurd to say that Cy Kellett could cause himself or this cup could cause itself. Well, there can't be infinite causes regressing into infinity. There must be an uncaused cause in order for there to be existence.
Open Forum with Tim Staples this hour. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll be right back with more of that right after this.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
If you spend any time on Twitter, Facebook, or mainstream media, you're probably familiar with the litany of slogans that skeptics employ to rescue you from the foolish belief that God exists. The constant onslaught seems to leave people with the idea that they have no alternative but to embrace atheism. How can a Christian respond? In One Less God Than You, John DeRosa breaks down 20 of the most common atheist challenges and shows you how to craft effective answers. Atheism is more aggressive and widespread than ever. Read One Less God Than You and prepare yourself to respond with the joyful truth that God is real. To get your copy of One Less God Than You, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
To many people, even many Christians, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the church to make salvation complicated and keep people in fear. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. The Bible supports it, Christians have historically believed in it, and it makes theological sense. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I provide the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a joyful, hopeful reality, not something shadowy and mysterious, but a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
This is Dr. David Anders. Does the problem of evil keep you from believing in God?
Join us for Call to Communion tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Thank you so much for joining us on this Thanksgiving. We all have so much to be thankful for, and you are among them here at Catholic Answers. We never forget that we owe everything to those who listen and support us one way or another, even if it's by offering a quick prayer on our behalf. We're very grateful for it. Tim Staples is our guest, and we get to ask him whatever we want. And these questions all came from the internet. And one of the fun things about doing an internet open forum is we get to choose the questions we want to ask you.
Amen.
So I think it makes it very interesting.
And just for folks to know, we're not going to do my third proof because I think everybody believes in God now.
If you don't believe in God now, after all that, well, all right, I'm sorry.
And we were going to get into the fact of the essentially ordered series of efficient causes and all kinds of fun stuff like that. So maybe it's better that we won't do.
But you can visit Catholic.com and all of these things. Just type in proofs for the existence of God, and you'll get all kinds of, a lot of very helpful material.
Amen.
All right, so this person wants to know. This person is apparently a landlord. Should Catholics allow Sikhs to celebrate Diwali in their home if they are renting out rooms to them?
Right. That is a great question. And for those who don't know, Diwali is one of the main feast days, not just of Sikhs, but Hindus all around the world. So it's a very large festival. It celebrates the victory of light over darkness, good over evil, which is kind of interesting because, Hindus believe evil is just as eternal as good. So there's a never-ending battle between good and evil. But at any rate, it's also associated with a particular goddess. But the question is a good one. What if you're renting out a room to a Hindu or a Sikh, I think was his particular question, should you allow that? And the answer is yes. If you rent out a room to someone, then as long as they're, not doing something that's immoral, hurting another person and such, then you call the police, right? That's a decision you have to make before you rent the room, right? If you have a problem in conscience, now, of course, we as Catholics have no problem with allowing folks to worship their God in the way that they will to worship. I think Pope St. John Paul II kind of put the nail in the coffin on that one back in 1986. And I forget the Assisi prayer gatherings and such. And I know everyone listening to me is not exactly a fan of those, but certainly I think we can agree that there is a time in which it is morally acceptable to allow folks to worship the way they will to worship, right? We pretty much agree. Even St. Thomas Aquinas famously taught that at times, even in Christian nations, it's permissible to allow these sorts of things because the squelching it can actually cause more harm than good. And so in this case, it can certainly be argued it's better to allow it, but it's a great opportunity for evangelism because if the person you're renting the room celebrates Diwali, that's a great place to start a conversation. Hey, tell me about Diwali. Let's talk about it. And that can be an open door for evangelism.
Thank you very, very much for that question. The next question, Tim, how can we know that the Gospels are not corrupted?
Great questions. These are great for a Thanksgiving. Huh?
I know, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's several ways. First, we approach, and I would challenge anyone who is approaching the Gospels to approach them the way we approach any other work of antiquity. That's a very important point to make because we approach it the same way we would approach if you're going to critique Caesar's Gallic Wars, for example. Right. How do you know that actually happened? Was that real? And Caesar, was he a real person, right? How do you do that? Well, what you do is you can begin with the document itself. How authoritative is this document? Well, there's a couple of things we could do. Number one, you take a look at the number of manuscripts that we have extant or in existence today, right? Caesar's Gallic Wars, we have about seven manuscripts. Now, a manuscript, actually the word itself means written by hand. Two Latin words there, compound word, written by hand. That is, these are the number of manuscripts in existence that were written before the advent of the printing press. Mm-hmm. So manuscripts, you have about seven. You have, the Iliad. As I recall, you have a few hundred manuscripts. And you can go down the list of works of antiquity, and you take a look. How many manuscripts? Are they in different languages? Are they in different countries? Do they come from different families of manuscripts? All of these things are important. But then secondly, you take a look at how ancient are the manuscripts. In other words, how close are they to the original? I think with Caesar's Gallic Wars, you're about 1,000 years from the original. I think the Iliad, it's similar, and on down the list. You have anywhere from 7 to a few hundred manuscripts. And the manuscripts written within 1,000 years, sometimes even as close as 500 years apart, right? These are good sorts of historical documents that people acknowledge, these things are historical. But then you also look at, are there others outside of the family that quote from these documents, whether it's Caesar's Gallic words. In other words, do you have people around the globe who quote it and say, yep, that's real? And how ancient are these folks? How close are they to the original? All right. Well, when you look at the Gospels, it is off the charts. There's nothing even close. We're talking, 1,000 years with Gallic Wars, hundreds of years with the Iliad, the Odyssey, and so many other documents we could look at. Well, we have fragments of the Gospel of John that have been dated to within approximately 20 to 25 years of the original penning of John's Gospel. This is off the charts, unheard of for any document of antiquity. We have entire manuscripts first we have substantial manuscripts of the Gospels within 200 years. We have entire manuscripts as old as roughly 350. So we're talking about within 300 years of the original. Again, unheard of in history, how close they are to the original. But when you look at the numbers, we're talking over 5,000 manuscripts, multiple languages from 3 continents, different families that came from different areas. There is nothing even close. Manuscript authority. And then when you look at people outside, you have Roman historians like Tacitus. You have a Jewish historian like Josephus. You have Pliny the Younger. You have example after example. In fact, one of my favorites, is in the British Museum in Manchester, England, which I've told you before I want to get there. I want to see this. There's a letter preserved by a fella. He's actually writing a letter to his son. It's Mara ben Serapion is his name, and he's writing to his son of the same name.
Right.
And he's not a Christian, but he's writing about the events that recently occurred in Israel with this Jesus guy. Right? And this was written roughly about 65 to 75 AD. And he's writing about how, man, they really messed up putting this. Now, he didn't write it like that, but I'm not going to quote it verbatim. But he says, they really messed up in putting this Jesus to death because now he's more popular than ever. They made the same mistake they made with Pythagoras and with Socrates.
Right.
Because when they put them to death, they became more popular than ever. Evel?
A little bit too much of the Thanksgiving wine there, Tim.
No, I've been hanging around with my 3-year-old too long. More than Evel. But I mean, extraordinary. We're talking about people that were not Christians that are basically giving their testimony to the veracity of the Christ event, both the existence of Christ as well as Christians.
So when you think about, like most of the, I think I might have learned this from you, that many of the ancient or the manuscripts of ancient documents we have actually come from the 700s and 800s because Charlemagne employed a lot of scholars to copy them.
Correct.
So if you have something that goes back to the time of Charlemagne, that's a great, that it goes back all the way to the 700s.
That's right.
But you're talking about within 20 years of the writing of the Gospel of John. It's unthinkable, really. I mean, you can't imagine that. If you had that of the Iliad, people would say this is the greatest thing ever discovered.
Oh, yeah. And if I could add just this one, because there's so much more we could talk about, but when you look at the accuracy as well of how
the copyists.
People talk about, there's so many inaccuracies and there's disagreement. Yes, there are disagreements among the manuscripts, but they are minor disagreements. We're talking about commas and a few words here and there, maybe a scripture verse here or there, none of which affect anything essential when it comes to the Gospels. It's extraordinary, once again, the accuracy, so that, for example, when the Muslim says, they have a doctrine called the doctrine of Tarif, the doctrine of corruption. The Gospels have been corrupted. Well, sorry about that. In fact, Muhammad himself acknowledges the Gospel in his day. He says to his followers, follow the Gospel. And those that have them, they're like, they have these great, the Christians and Jews, they're like donkeys. They have these great tomes on their back, but they don't know what they say. But they have those great tomes. And he says you can read them and you can believe them, but they point to me. Well, guess what? We know the Gospels that Muhammad was talking about. And they are the same Gospels we have today because we have complete manuscripts of the Gospels hundreds of years before Muhammad.
Yeah.
Sorry, pal. They point to Jesus, not to you.
Then, if I may, before we go to the break,
Yes.
Scholarship on the Gospels is actually much greater than scholarship on the Quran, in part because certain Muslim authorities have not welcomed scholarship on the Quran. So we know a lot more about the Gospels just because people aren't afraid to get killed. They write about them.
I was going to say, yes, the penalties are prohibitive of investigative work.
Yeah. So like having real historians do real historical. Christians welcome that.
That's right.
And Islam thus far has not welcomed that.
Yeah, and remember, too, when you're talking about Islam, you're not talking about the period of antiquity.
No, right. Yeah.
So, and for those who don't know, the period of antiquity ends in 476 AD, with the death of the Western Roman Empire. That's generally understood. Pre-476, you're talking antiquity. And if you compare the Gospels to any other work of antiquity, it is so ridiculous. It's not even close. To deny the historicity of the Gospels would be to deny all of antiquity, which is absurd.
Again, happy Thanksgiving to you. We'll take a quick break. Be right back with more Tim Staples' Internet Open Forum on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Go forth and preach the good news. It's not just a suggestion. If you want to take more seriously the command of Jesus to share the gospel with those around you, consider joining St. Paul Street Evangelization. It's a grassroots organization that brings the Catholic faith to the streets in a non-confrontational way. Visit our website, www.streetevangelization.com, to learn more. And don't forget to like us on Facebook. It's time to do our part.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
Called you guys a couple of years ago telling you that I had an answer for your question. There's nothing going to stop me from becoming a Catholic. I'm about to start my 3rd year. It's been a beautiful journey. And some advice for people who are thinking about becoming Catholic, oh my goodness, listen to EWTN. Day and night. It's just beautiful. Forget the mainstream media. Just stick to EWTN. You'll learn so much and you'll want to become a Catholic like now.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live on this Thanksgiving Day. We are delighted to have you. We're not quite live. We pre-recorded this a few days earlier for you, but so we could be with our families, stealing food off their plates.
You mean I'm not here right now?
You're not here right now.
Oh.
No. It feels weird, huh?
So I'm eating turkey right now.
You're home eating turkey. Really good turkey, too, because Valerie cooked it. Yeah, you are. And one of the things that a lot of people are going to be thankful for this year is that this year is over. Like a lot of people,
I know
it's been a terrible year for people.
It really has,
really horrible.
Yeah, we've talked to so many people that have lost work. In fact, I just was answering an email right before I went on the air from a fellow who lost his job, a high-paying job. He's out of work right now and is in a bad situation. He has some money to last for a while, but he doesn't know what he's going to do.
It's awful to be out of a job.
Yeah, especially when you're older.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right. If you got responsibilities and
it's harder to get work, when you're older.
Yeah.
And you've left a high-paying job and you can't find anything comparable, it can be rough.
Yeah. And also for us men, I don't know how it is for women, but men, I know this from having been out of work myself. It hurts. It hurts to be out of work.
Yeah, because you're the breadwinner, quote unquote, right? And it's hard.
All right, our next caller. I love this question. I am delighted to have this question. Very simple, straightforward question. Can we know what God's personality is?
That is a great question. Personality. Well, we do have to be careful as far as referring to God having a personality, because I love the way the Catechism puts it in paragraph 42. God transcends all creatures. We must therefore continually purify our language of everything in it that is limited, image-bound, or imperfect, if we are not to confuse our image of God, the inexpressible, incomprehensible, the invisible, the ungraspable, with our human representations. Our human words always fall short of the mystery of God. I love that paragraph 42 again of the Catechism, because yes, we can talk about a personality in as much as God is three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But at the same time, when you say a personality, you're putting limits, right? And so we have to be very careful not to do that.
Yeah.
He has a particular personality. Now, when we talk about a personality, we can only use analogy. A personality, like Cy Kellett has a personality, and I have a personality.
That's debatable for some people, but
I have a personality. Well, a personality by definition is limiting. You have a particular personality that is not like my personality and such. All right, so I just had to get that out of the way.
Yeah, right.
But then, yes, in as much as God is personal, as long as we are careful to purify it of all that which is limiting, we get a sense of who God is and how, through the revelation he has given to us in Scripture and tradition, as interpreted by the magisterium of the church. So we can learn about what God likes, what God doesn't like, right? I mean, Scripture says, I hate sin, right? I hate divorce. These are quotes from Almighty God through sacred Scripture, right? So we do get a sense of a, again, quote unquote, personality in that sense. And because he's a personal God, of course, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, it's important that we know this, because he calls us to have a personal relationship with him. So we want to, here I'll leave you with this, but we want to have the balance between limiting God to a personality. And one thing, I think it's in the next paragraph, in fact, that the Catechism talks about, be careful, beware of limiting God. Paragraph 43. Catch this. Admittedly, in speaking about God like this, our language is using human modes of expression. Why? Because that's the only expression we have, right? Nevertheless, it really does attain to God himself, though unable to express him in his infinite simplicity. Likewise, we must recall that between creator and creature, no similitude can be expressed without implying an even greater dissimilitude. And that concerning God, we cannot grasp what he is, but only what he is not, and how other beings stand in relation to him. So it is a mind blower, right?
We really is.
When we say we can't say what he is, well, wait a minute. You say God is love. Isn't that saying something that he is? Yes, but that's only by analogy. What the Catechism is saying is we can't exhaust the is, because when we talk about is, 2 + 2 is 4. We exhaust the 2 + 2 in the 4, right? So we can't say what God is in that sense, because it would require complete comprehension, which only God has of himself. And so we want to have that healthy balance. I think, remember this, folks, look at paragraph 42 and 43, because I think the Catechism does a brilliant job in the balance between be careful not to limit God, but at the same time understand that which is revealed about God does tell us something about, yes, who he is, although it tells us a whole lot more about what he's not. And even the is has to be qualified. Because there is an infinite more about God that we don't know. So again, I'll leave you with this thought. In speaking God about this, our language is using human modes of expression. Nevertheless, it really does attain to God himself. That's important. In order to have a personal relationship with God, yes, we know God is Trinity. That is true. But exactly what it means, we can only know by analogy. We can't know what Trinity means in and of itself, this side of the veil. Though it's unable to express him in his infinite simplicity, right? So as long as we acknowledge these parameters, right, we can know things about God and have a relationship with him based on that which is revealed, while always acknowledging that God himself is infinitely beyond our definitions.
Wow. Now, I'm going to tell you this next question, I think, comes from a supporter of Donald Trump. Yeah, you have to get from the context whether that is true, but I think it does.
Okay.
This person asks, are prayers efficacious if they have not achieved their earthly purpose? For example, if someone says a novena for a person to be elected and they don't win the election.
Yes.
I'm just guessing.
Yes.
But God bless you for saying the novena.
Amen.
The person wants to know what happened to the prayers if I didn't get what I wanted.
I have to remind folks, it ain't over.
Okay, well,
the election has not been certified. All right, but anyway, no, it's a great question, and the answer, I think, is a really important one. In all of our prayers, my friends, we must use Jesus Christ as the ultimate paradigm for our prayer. Why? Because he is the Word of God manifest in the flesh. So if you want to learn to pray, listen to Jesus. He gives us the Our Father, right? And watch Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he says a very important thing. Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass. Nevertheless, not my will. Speaking from his human nature, he did not wake up on Good Friday morning and say, boy, I can't wait for the nails. No, his human nature revulsed at that. He says, Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass. Nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. And you see that echoed in St. John in 1 John 5:14. Whatever we ask according to his will, he hears us. And if we know he hears us, we have the petitions we've asked of him. So in all of our prayers, my friend, if we're praying for an election, if we're praying for whatever, the healing of our child, if we're praying, we must always understand, not my will, but thy will be done. And it is God's will for there to be free will. People can freely reject God's antecedent will. And there's so many other factors to be factored in to where ultimately we must trust God for the outcome and know that our prayers are efficacious. Whether they work for the intention we had, they work.
Yeah.
Because you merit, if you're in a state of grace, simply by your intention of loving people with the truth.
You know, part of why I said God bless this person for praying the novena is I think when it comes to voting, most of us, even though we don't identify it, we're a little bit willful and we don't do the basic things like ask God who he'd like us to vote for or pray a novena for the election, that we really have to be very humble in engaging in something like voting.
Amen.
I mean, in a certain sense, all the things that the prophet said to the kings, because they had the political power, those things apply to us.
Amen.
Now, and you better say a novena, or
that's right. When you're praying for your baseball team, and don't tell me you don't do it. Yes, you do. People pray. I can't tell you how many times, even though I know what I know, I still. When Phillip Rivers was on the Chargers and it came down to that final field goal, I'm praying, Lord, please let him make this.
I don't pray for a sports team, but I do say this. Wouldn't it be nice, Lord, if Phillip Rivers could get a Super Bowl before he retires? Wouldn't that be nice, Lord? Just leave it in God's hands.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Tim, thanks. I really appreciate it.
It can't be over.
It is over, and now you can go have your turkey.
All right, brother. Well, God bless you. It's good to be with you.
It's always good to be with you. Tim Staples is the Director of Apologetics and Evangelization here at Catholic Answers. He's the author of Behold Your Mother, a biblical and historical defense of the Marian doctrines, which has really, in recent years, become the go-to book for Catholics in defending what Catholics believe about Mary. So I will highly recommend that book to you. Also the author of a whole bunch of other things, like nuts and bolts.
All right, brother.
What's the
nuts and bolts? The practical how-to guide for evangelism.
I swear I'm going to memorize that subtitle one of these days. Hey, coming up next, we're going to talk about the gospel of Jesus Christ coming to the new world. It's not the story that maybe you'd expect us to tell on Thanksgiving. We will talk about the pilgrims, but there is a much bigger story. It also includes Our Lady of Guadalupe. More of that right after this. Happy Thanksgiving and welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Thanks for being with us on this Thanksgiving. We're delighted to get a chance to be with you. If this is your first time listening to Catholic Answers, because you're not usually off at this hour, I'll just let you know you can find out all about us at Catholic.com. Just visit Catholic.com. You can find out all about what we do. We're an apostolate in California for now, dedicated to explaining and defending the Catholic faith. Why do you say that?
What are you trying to confuse people, Cy?
Well, I'm just saying California is tolerable.
Oh, you mean
to a point.
It might slide into the ocean?
You never know what's going to happen. Chris Check is our guest. Chris is president of Catholic Answers. Hi, Chris.
Hello, Cy. You remind me of a lyric from the famous California poet Warren Zevon.
Oh, yeah.
If California slides into the ocean like the mystics and statistics say it will, I predict this hotel will be standing until I pay my bill.
That's the great Warren. He really could write a lyric, couldn't he?
I'm trying to think what song that came from. I'm a great admirer of Warren Zevon.
Most people just know him from Werewolves of London.
Yeah, he wrote a lot of wonderful songs and did in his early career. He was working with the Everly Brothers. But there's an episode in Warren Zevon's life where he's in Barcelona, I think, visiting the Gothic cathedral there. Not the Gaudi, but the one in the Gothic quarter. And he, I think it's his wife who tells the story. He expresses his admiration for the Catholic Church and how beautifully they do things.
Really?
Yeah. So,
because you always think of him as an unbeliever, and I hope that he, in the end, came to believe. But, well, that's very nice. Good job, Spain. Spain always does it right.
Well, it does. It shows we're in the apologetics trade here. Strictly speaking, that means constructing the logical arguments to defend what the Church teaches. But I've always said, there's a broader kind of apologetics, whether it's an apologetics of architecture or art or beauty or music, or any one of these that draws. It's all drawing us closer to Jesus.
Yeah. Yes.
Or if it's not. So if the building's not drawing you closer to Jesus,
or the apologetics not, somebody's doing something wrong.
It's defective. Yep.
Well, there's the other thing though. It's either it's defective or you are.
Right.
And in time it will work on you and overcome your defects.
I was in Prague one time many years ago in the beautiful, I think it's St. Vitus Cathedral there, where good King Wenceslas is buried. And
the one that looked out on the Feast of Stephen?
He, as a matter of fact, he did.
Okay, just want to make sure we're talking about the same one.
Bring me flesh and bring me wine. That's always been one of my favorite Christmas carols.
It's a good one.
It is, because it's a sing-along. It's manly. It's a manly song. Yeah. I was there with some non-Catholics, and he was staggered by the place, to be sure, the one that I was talking to. And I said, "It's magnificent, isn't it?" And he said, "It is magnificent, as long as it doesn't become the worship of the religion." And I'd never heard that before. This was, 20 years ago. I'd never heard that from a Protestant, that all of this is not the worship of God. This beautiful cathedral is not the worship of God. It's the worship of the religion. And that was his criticism of it.
It's so interesting because as a Catholic, I've never experienced a church that way.
No.
Like, I've never walked into a church and gone, praise to the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Like, you feel yourself in the presence of something holy. That's what a great church does.
Right.
Anyway, we're going to talk, the Catholics and Protestants do figure in the story that we're about to tell, which is the coming of the gospel to the new world this hour. And I'm very happy to have you with us, Chris, because I love your historical work. I love to hear you tell stories.
My twisted interpretations of history.
Yes. I had to give a talk to a group one time right after they had heard you speak, and you had been speaking about Lepanto. And I was like, I'm doomed.
Was this the men's group up in
This was in Australia. When we were in Australia.
Okay, right. Yeah.
So you had just finished speaking about Lepanto, and I thought, I'm doomed because this is such a great talk when you talk about Lepanto. And I'm looking out at them, and they all have that look of like, we're ready to go. We're ready to fight for the gospel. Give me a rosary in one hand and a sword in the other. They're all looking like that. And I said, did you just come from hearing Chris Check speak? And they said, yes. And I said, was Don Juan dancing on the bow of a boat? And they all cheered. They're like, yeah, he was. I was like, yeah, okay, I love that story too. So is that available for people, by the way? Can they get your talk?
We have the 3-hour version here at Catholic Answers at shop.catholic.com.
Yeah, you should get it. Yeah. Okay, but so this is your forte, really. is talking about history. Don't you think? Or am I selling it wrong?
I like to, you know what it is, Si? I like to see the path of salvation history. I like to see, here's how I would say. I like to see the incarnation at work.
Yes.
In the story of man.
Yeah, great.
How about that?
And that's part of what Thanksgiving is about, is that the encounter between the people who came and the people who are already here is an encounter between a people who had received the gospel and a people who had not yet received the gospel.
That is true.
And we don't like to emphasize that anymore, because that makes it seem like we're saying the Native American people were somehow lesser, and that's not at all what that means. It's a people who haven't yet received news of something very, very important.
That's exactly right, and the same in south of the Rio Grande and in Canada as well.
Right, and this is one of the things too that I've learned from you. Actually, I remember specifically when I learned this from you. This idea of thinking about the different ways the gospel was brought to America, and the way that it was brought to the United States, what we now know as the United States, wasn't the best.
No, and elements of it that linger. Si, it's a kind of a funny combination of individualism and exceptionalism. That's how I would describe the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims were a particular group of Puritans, descendants of Anabaptists or Calvinists, who in England were trying to purify the Church of England. So actually what that meant was...
They're anti-sacramentalists.
Get all the Catholic bits.
Priests and sacraments, get rid of them.
Anything any of that's still in the C of E, we need to get rid of. So that's the element of it. So that's what that word Puritan comes from. Many years later, of course, H.L. Mencken says a Puritan is someone who is lying awake at night, worried that somewhere someone might be having a good time.
That's probably the greatest line from Megan. That is so brilliant. Yeah. Someone somewhere is having a good time.
Right. A little unfair to the Puritans. I mean, I think they believed in having a good time too, but and maybe some of their dourness is overstated. But what we do know about them is they had this Calvinist exceptionalism that really, I think, finds its origin. I mean, you get Tim in here, and you could talk about it better than I can, but really finds its origins in sort of a return to the Old Testament. So the Pilgrims certainly understood themselves as new Israelites.
Yeah.
And it's obvious in all of their sermons. The common names, we would say Christian names, the common names, first names, among Puritans all come from the Old Testament.
Right.
Yeah. So we see a lot of influence of the sense that we're the new chosen people. So you have this exceptionalism that you find in Calvinism, the elect, right, and then an individualism as well. This is kind of the funny thing about Protestantism. Everyone can pick up scriptures and read it as he sees fit, right? So how those things actually are in harmony has never been particularly clear to me. But the worst elements of that individualism and exceptionalism, are at play in current American life and in our politics and our foreign policy. But they certainly were, to get to your original question, I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
Very much at play in the in the treatment of the indigenous population in the world that is, or in the part of the world that is now called the United States of America, and that finds itself expressed in this term we use to be manifest destiny, where we have the exceptional thing, the shining city on the hill, however you want to describe that. This is ours, given to us by God. Right, and so your land, by the way, is in the way. Your practices are in the way. Your traditions, your customs are in the way. So the experience with the natives is very different in French Canada, Spanish Latin America, and Protestant United States, with the exception, of course, of California, Junipero Serra, different story.
That's a total right.
And then Franciscans and later French priests in the high Southwest. Wow, sorry.
No, I think that's great. And this is the thing is that we tend maybe to, I know a young woman who's kind of a social justice type. That's what they call them nowadays, right? And she's not going to celebrate Thanksgiving this year because it represents an offense against Indian people. And part of me thinks, well, she's kind of right about that.
Oh, there are elements of it, for sure.
I mean, like we have this kind of story of Thanksgiving, which is disconnected from the history of the holiday itself, which is really a post-Civil War holiday of giving thanks to God.
Oh, sure. Abraham Lincoln is the first one,
yes,
and then it gets a jump start by one of the Roosevelts, maybe, or Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah. So it's not really like the founding fathers were celebrating Thanksgiving. But then these post-Civil War people go back and tell a story about the Pilgrims in order to kind of unite the country and bring us together again.
Very much, it's a deliberate attempt to help create a national myth, and I'm actually not opposed to that kind of thing. I mean, if it's done out of whole cloth, then it's dishonest. But the Pilgrim Fathers who came to the Massachusetts Bay Colony or Plymouth Rock, that is an important part of the story of the American founding, and there were good and bad elements of the relationship with the natives.
Right. But there were, this is the part that there were better projects for sharing the gospel in the New World than the one that the Pilgrims engaged on.
Mexico and Canada are examples of these.
Let's talk about that when we come back. We'll take a quick break. Thank you for joining us on this Thanksgiving. We're talking about the coming of the gospel of Jesus Christ to the New World on this day when we remember the Pilgrims and the Puritans and all of that. We'll continue that with Chris Check, our president, right after this.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Hi, this is Teresa Tomeo, host of Catholic Connection, heard every morning, weekdays on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network, wishing you and yours a beautiful and blessed, happy Thanksgiving. And remember, as we're reminded in Colossians 3:17, whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of our Lord Jesus, giving thanks through him to God the Father. Happy Thanksgiving.
Welcome back to this Thanksgiving edition of Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, joined by the president of Catholic Answers, Chris Check, talking about Thanksgiving, but also in the wider context of the coming of the gospel into the New World. And it had various different ways. The gospel was introduced into the New World in different places, in different ways. The tiny little bit of knowledge that I have suggests to me that the Pilgrims didn't do it the best, that it was done better in other places. But it doesn't mean that they were horrible, bad people, just that there were, for one thing, 1620, the Pilgrims come to Massachusetts.
400 years.
1620 is only 100 years after the Reformation. I mean, We've gone through the wars of religion. It's white hot. There's hatred, really, between these folks and the Catholic Church.
Well, I would say the wars of religion are continuing. In fact, I mean, the 30 Years' War, right? That's early part of the 17th century.
Right.
And then that is followed by, or maybe that's just about to get started, And then, of course, that's followed by the English Civil War, which isn't as long, but it's as not quite as brutal. It's on a smaller scale. But the same kind of attitudes about warfare and modern warfare that were birthed in the 30 Years' War, you see made manifest, particularly, like, for example, in Oliver Cromwell's treatment of Ireland.
Yeah,
I think of that folk song "Young Ned of the Hill." I can't sing it on the air.
Come on,
it's a little. It's got a kind of a Irish element to it.
Well, put your finger on the beep button. Just beep. Just hit beep. Every time you think something bad's, I'm just teasing.
A curse upon you.
Nick is all
Oliver
panicked in there. I can't do it.
Right.
I'm not going to be able to keep up with the beeps.
But in any case, So the wars. It is in the context. You're absolutely right, of those wars. And even within England, of course, there is an understanding, even after Henry, there is an understanding of a relationship between monarchy and church. But the Puritans want none of this.
No.
And the Calvinists, certainly, they want none of this idea that, to them, all of the problem was that the Roman Catholic Church had become too tied up in its own, royalty, if you will.
Yeah,
The Papal States, the Pope as a secular monarch. So we're gonna purge of all of that and get back to the early church. Is the idea among the Calvinists, and that's the idea that the Pilgrims bring here, and not, as we all were told in third grade, as martyrs of
religious freedom.
Yeah, people wanted to bring religious freedom. No, they wanted to come and practice religious tyranny or religious exclusiveness.
They wanted their own place to practice their own religion. And they sure as heck didn't want you coming there and practicing your religion.
And only theirs. And even into I know I've said on this show in the past, my favorite example of this is even into the time of Paul Revere, so into the 18th century. David Hackett Fisher, in his book Paul Revere's Ride, points out you didn't celebrate Christmas in Massachusetts.
No, that was Catholic.
In the 18th century.
Yeah,
and there were no public Christmas trees in Scotland until somebody told me, into the 1960s or 70s or something. So that's John Knox up there, but it's kind of that influence of Calvinism. We're getting far afield here. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So these pilgrims, they come because they want to flee to a place where they can basically do what they want religiously.
Yeah, create their new world, their new Jerusalem.
When they come, however, they meet what is quite possibly a Catholic person, at least a person who was baptized Catholic. I don't know if you know this, but Squanto.
I've heard this story, but go ahead. You probably have it better than I do.
Well, this is one of the most amazing things in the whole history of the United States. This is the story of Squanto, of this person Squanto who greets them and can speak their language and can interpret for them to the local people, even though his people are dead, because he's been taken to Spain as a captive or as a servant or something. I don't know how you would qualify, but I think as a captive, though. And he apparently has been baptized by the Spanish. So that would mean baptized into the Catholic Church.
Right.
But there's no evidence for certain that this happened. But then he wants to, at some point, maybe after his time of indenture is over, he wants to go back home. And so to get him back home, he's sent to England. While he's waiting for a ship that can take him, he learns to speak some English. He gets sent back. I think he ends up he has to walk hundreds of miles home once he gets to the Americas. And then he gets back to his village and everybody's dead because smallpox probably, but something like smallpox. One of the European diseases has wiped out. So he's kind of a guy on his own trying to make it with the other Native Americans, but no family. And then he's the guy that they meet when they come to so they come all the way across the ocean thinking they're going to come and meet the Indian people. No idea how they'll communicate with them. And they meet this English-speaking, possibly Catholic Squanto.
It's a good story.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. But it also gives some indication of what was going on in the Americas at the time. I mean, people think of the Pilgrims were the first to come. This is not true at all. And that particularly the Basque, but also French Huguenots and British were sailing up and down the east coast of America all the time because there were so many fish. They were coming over to take fish and then just sailing back across the Atlantic.
Right. Well, and Jamestown predates Plymouth, right?
Yeah. So I think there's this kind of image of the pilgrims out in the wilderness, but there were Basque ships that came. There were Europeans around, and there were people like Squanto who could speak their language. Very, very odd. So possibly, we don't know for sure that Squanto was baptized into the Catholic Church, but it's quite possible given his life story.
This is a couple of months ago, of course, when we were all having to defend Christopher Columbus more than usual because his statues are being torn or taken down. They're either being taken down by vandals or vandals who are elected officials. And so we found ourselves in October, especially having to defend Christopher Columbus. But it is almost, Cy, what you're saying here. It's unless there is an agreement that we want to look at the story in the light of the incarnation, there's going to be a limit to what we can agree on. And it'll be, Columbus, I think this is obvious, but similarly with the Puritans, for all of their heresies and everything, these were Christian people.
Yeah,
they were Christians, and their motives were in their faith.
Yeah,
I would say considerably more than in Jamestown. Now, both had kind of government backing to a degree. Jamestown more than the other, or investors, if you will. So there were economic interests as well. But then also in Mexico and in France, sure, there are trade interests.
Yeah.
If I said France, Canada, beaver, for example, in the French,
and gold in the case of Mexico.
Yeah, really, yeah. But all of these are. It isn't long after that the missionaries are sent along to start to baptize, to teach, to catechize and baptize the natives. That seems to be less of a concern in the United States.
The mission, yeah. Okay, so here's two things that, again, I got these from you. But one is this failure of missionary activity among the Native Americans, but also the failure to...
By Protestants.
Yeah. And also, but the failure to integrate with the Native American people, where within a few generations, you have a new thing called a Mexican in Mexico, which is European men who took Mexican wives, and
this is deliberate policy.
Yeah.
In New Spain, it is deliberate policy to catechize, baptize, and intermarry with the native population. And in fact, the Spanish, as far as I know, are a people more than any other who have very elaborate charts, describing the names for all the levels of mixed blood. Some people take offense to this. I mean, it's just a demographic, I don't know, what would you say, like a demographic science.
But the Spanish learn the languages of the people like Junipero Serra much later. Like, he goes and learns the languages. It's not easy to go learn the native language.
Especially most of these languages, of course, aren't written down. And then you've got absolute, in my mind, linguistic geniuses like Brebeuf in Canada with Isaac Jogues, these Jesuits. My goodness, I mean, you think of these men, capital intellects, and just the first-rate minds of their age, masters of languages. Of course, they would have had Greek and Latin.
Yeah.
And so they're very adept at languages. But Brebeuf coming to the Hurons and without a written language, and then giving them one, and then preparing a catechism in it.
Right.
And a carol.
Yeah. So let's go to Canada for a minute then, because these are primarily these are not merchants. These are primarily celibate men who have devoted themselves, really truly devoted themselves to Jesus Christ, and all they want to do when they come to the Huron and who's the other ones? I can't remember. But Iroquois. All they want to do is share the gospel. They've come to serve people, in other words. They have not come in any way to dominate the people.
No, and I mean, I think everyone's familiar with the horrible martyrdoms that these men endured. I mean, ghastly, diabolical, brutal tortures. But setting those aside, just the living conditions. that these guys endured when any one of them could have been, a university president or or a seminary rector,
right?
or head of an abbey or whatever it was. Well, perhaps not an abbey. What do Jesuits call it?
A house.
A house.
It's just a house for the Jesuits.
Yeah. But in any case, no. But so and you read the descriptions of life in the longhouses, and the Huron longhouses, where there's animals inside and they're defecating inside, and animals running around, and then, fairly free expression of marital love.
Sometimes marital, but
right.
Yeah.
And then the smoke that fills the place. And so, Jogues, or one of them, talking about, I can go outside and freeze to death, or be in here and try to write in the smoke where my eyes are stinging me.
And right. Extraordinary men.
They did it out of love of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and then you get people like Kateri Tekakwitha as a... Isn't that good how I pronounce that?
Amen.
Saint Kateri Tekakwitha, well, you don't see that here in the United States. We'll be right back with more about the coming of the gospel to the New World on this Thanksgiving.
Bringing you the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas, is one of the most courageous leaders in the church, known for his outspoken support of unborn life, Orthodox faith and morals, and reforming Catholic institutions. In his groundbreaking new book, Light and Leaven, he offers a forthright perspective on the state of the church today and calls on the lay faithful to meet its challenges boldly. Touching on topics including parish renewal, the centrality of the Eucharist, the need for prayer and silence in a noisy and distracted age, and the battle between good and evil in the church and world, Bishop Strickland's wise insights and evident love for souls will inspire and edify you. To order your copy of Light and Leaven, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
To many people, even many Christians, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the church to make salvation complicated and keep people in fear. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. The Bible supports it, Christians have historically believed in it, and it makes theological sense. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I provide the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a joyful, hopeful reality, not something shadowy and mysterious, but a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
This is Dr. David Anders. Is God an angry God?
We answer questions like these every day on Call to Communion, tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live on this Thanksgiving Day. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest is Chris Check, president of Catholic Answers. When we think about the Pilgrims coming, we think about Christianity coming to America. The Pilgrims were not early arrivers. The Spanish had come to lots and lots of parts of America decades and in many cases quite a few decades before the Pilgrims came. But it's all part of one great story, which is the coming of the good news of Jesus Christ to the people of the Americas. That story has unbelievable tragedy, often unspeakable violence and abuse involved in it over the centuries. But it is one that does transform a place that is violent and in many, many cases unlettered, and without the benefit of understanding that God loves each and every soul, to a place where the gospel thrives, where you can find people living peaceful and joyful and saved Christian lives by the millions and the hundreds of millions all across the Americas. So,
though, Si, it's threatened again. Our dear friend Archbishop Alexander Sample, I think of him especially in the news lately with Oregon tightening restrictions on worship, limiting it to 10 or fewer people or something like this.
Yeah. Well, and it's threatened also just by the conditions of the
modern world.
Unbelief. Yeah, and sometimes quite satisfied and saleable unbelief. I mean, there's a lot of people making money off destroying our culture.
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things we talked about at the break is that in this great story that the pilgrims do play their part in, the Catholic priest often figures as the defender of the people of the Americas.
Yes.
Like often, again and again and again. The story is of soldiers who are abusive or merchants who are exploitative. But the priest, whether it's Father Serra here or Bishop de las Casas in southern Mexico or Father de Smet in the Midwest and in the Jesuits of Canada, the priest stands out as the person who defends the native people.
You know, when Cortez arrives in Tenochtitlan and then eventually conquers it, one of the first things that he tells the Aztecs is that our sovereign across the sea is going to send better men than we are.
Yeah,
that's what Cortez says.
Isn't that a great line?
He said, better men than we are, who are going to share with you, the fullness of real truth. And this, in fact, is what happens. And it is Franciscans and Dominicans in Mexico who are the ones who report back to the emperor, to Charles V, of the abuse that natives are enduring at the hands of Spanish soldiers or political officials, and in fact concealing the report thereof, hidden in a barrel with bacon, or I think the story goes.
Oh, right, yeah. But that's exactly what he did. Yeah.
In our own country, you mentioned Father de Smet, the Jesuit hero who was up in the Dakotas and into Idaho, what is now Idaho, and he was a defender of the Lakota, probably against against the predations of the American government. But a little one who is less known, but his cause is underway and of great interest to me, is Father Samuel Mazzucchelli, who was a Dominican, an Italian, and he evangelized good portions of southern Wisconsin into Iowa, a real polymath, built churches, designed cities, was an astronomer. But he also found himself constantly defending the rights of the natives, Potawatomi, I guess, in Wisconsin against the government of against the government of the United States. So you're right, and then Sarah. Also,
can I add one more?
Yeah.
You remember Helen Hunt Jackson wrote the book Ramona, and it's about
just up the street from us, or just over the mountain. Yeah.
Well, there is in the late 1800s this growing sense that we have mistreated the Native Americans, the Indians, is what of the time, and it comes as a consequence in large part because of this book Ramona that Helen Hunt Jackson wrote about a white woman who married an Indian man here in San Diego. And it comes from a true story. And there's a wonderful priest in the book who protects them and marries them and protects them from the white people who want to kill this Indian man. That actually happened.
Yes.
And it's a Father Eubach, who was a priest here in San Diego. So this is just another example of over and over and over again, the priest as protector of the native people.
You know, Sai, these things are often difficult to talk about in our time where so much conversation gets reduced to what you can tweet in 130 characters or less or whatever the limit is. I don't even know. I don't tweet. And so there will be inevitably someone listening and saying, "Oh, well, why aren't they mentioning, all the scalping or the way the Cherokee behaved or the Iroquois behaved or whatever?" And all of these things are so. There is horrible brutality. The Aztecs themselves, of course, probably practiced human sacrifice on a scale that no people in history ever did.
No, it really does almost seem like a satanic kind of outpouring before the coming of Christianity.
Yeah.
It does. It's just maniacal what the Aztecs did.
My only point here is that it's a complex tale, as all tales in human history are, and there's heroic and villainous on both sides of it. I would recommend, I think I gave it to you, Sai, because I saw it sitting in your office, and you probably haven't read it yet, Paul Horgan's book, A Distant Trumpet, which Paul Horgan was a Catholic novelist from upstate New York, and then found or resettled when he was a boy. His parents moved out to the high Southwest, and he has a biography of LeMay, Archbishop LeMay of Santa Fe. But also he wrote this book, A Distant Trumpet, which talks about the Indian wars in the New Mexico and Arizona territories. And I think he really handles it beautifully. Horrible things were done on both sides, and it's a complex tale, but there are truly magnificent and saintly priests whose chief interest, and of course it goes back to these Jesuits or back to Franciscans and Dominicans in Mexico, whose chief interest is bringing souls to salvation. And this is part of the limit of when you have the conversation with somebody. If you're not prepared to say that when Columbus came here, he was funded by a crown whose motive was the salvation of people, right? They had other motives, for sure. One of them was get enough gold to go recover the Holy Land, right? But then there's just kind of a limit to the conversation that we can have. So we started the hour by saying, I like to think about history in terms of the incarnation at work in human history. Once you've accepted that that's the fullness of the understanding of history, I find it hard to talk about it any other way.
Because that is the true way to talk about history. And this drives modern people insane, that some things are true and some things are false. But Christ is the center point. I mean, when God comes into history, that's the center point of history. And so everything that follows upon that is either the story of humans who haven't yet met that God, humans who are resisting the march of that God through history, or humans who are assisting in it. There's nothing else. There's no other.
And then occasionally in the story, God will do something like a massive lightning flash, in case you're not getting it. and the apparition at Tepeyac Hill is the example par excellence of that in this hemisphere. And of course, we have the Tilma still revealing secrets to remind us of that.
Well, I want to ask you about that, but I better take a break before I do that, because we do want to move in then, because there is this, there are the halting efforts of human beings, and then there are the efforts of heaven. And the consequences of what happened with the apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe are mind-boggling.
They are.
They're mind-boggling. They're beyond. You could have sent 1 million priests and every single one of them a saint, and it wouldn't have had the effect that Our Lady of Guadalupe had.
Yes.
In the world. All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. We're continuing our conversation with our president, Chris Check, about the coming of the good news of Jesus Christ into the new world. And we do that in part, of course, because it's Thanksgiving. And on Thanksgiving, we think about the pilgrims. And the pilgrims are just part of a much, much larger story. And they play, just like all of us, a much smaller part in that whole story than Our Lady does. So we'll talk about Our Lady when we come back.
This is Harry Connick Jr., and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features daily Mass, prayers, articles, and meditations in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church. On the web at magnificat.com.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His Church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
Called you guys a couple of years ago telling you that I had an answer for your question. There's nothing going to stop me from becoming a Catholic. I'm about to start my 3rd year. It's been a beautiful journey. And some advice for people who are thinking about becoming Catholic, oh my goodness, listen to EWTN day and night. It's just beautiful. Forget the mainstream media. Just stick to EWTN. You'll learn so much, and you'll want to become a Catholic like now.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. On this,
our sponsor, San Pellegrino. Wouldn't that be something?
A little bit of San Pellegrino water while you're talking about on Thanksgiving.
I love these. I'm sorry, I go through them like crazy. They're just so there's not a calorie in them, and
what I mean,
I don't know.
We're completely off topic, but what is it about San Pellegrino water that is so good? It's so much better than everything else that you could drink.
It's made by Catholics.
Oh, is that it?
I don't know. I mean, they're Italians.
Yeah, that's it.
It's named after
good Catholic water. It's good Catholic water. Yeah.
Saint Peregrine, if you're suffering from cancer, right?
Is Saint Peregrine related to Saint Pellegrino?
Is Pellegrino pilgrims? Holy pilgrims is pilgrims. Yeah.
Oh, so it's pilgrim water. Perfect for today's show, which was on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
There is nobody who we have on this show who I am more easily distracted with than you.
It's a special skill of mine. Can I share with you? Jackie hates it when I start telling a story because it will inevitably take a few turns down some corridors, and she is. Could you just get to the end?
Well,
please.
Thing, she has the virtue of being witty.
Of impatience?
No, that's not a virtue. Impatience is not a, but she just says a quick line, and it's very, very funny.
Right.
She
gets all her material from me. Yeah.
Well, but she tightens it up. That's the important thing. She gets it from you, but she tightens it up.
No, but this is for 30 years. This has been an idée fixe of do you have to
cut to the chase?
Yeah. This doesn't have to take an hour.
But it's not just that. It's something about you distracts me. I don't know what it is, but why am I talking about the Pellegrino water that you're drinking? I have no idea. Yeah. Catholic Answers, sponsored by.
I have ADD. I have a hard time staying.
I do. Okay, well, we're not well matched for radio then. But let's go back to let's talk about Our Lady of Guadalupe a little bit.
Yes,
because we could talk about the pilgrims all day long, and the story's not going to get any better. But that's Our Lady of Guadalupe. That story, I can never get enough of it. So give us the setting.
And with each passing year, as I dig deeper and deeper into the story, I fall more in love with it, and my devotion to her.
This is how I always start the story. Can I just tell you how I always start the story?
Yes.
First of all, Joan of Arc saved Catholic Europe. Then that's how I always I don't know. I always have to connect it to Joan of Arc.
Well, they are singular, I think.
I know.
How,
you and I share this view.
God intervenes so directly in the affairs of men. The
whole history of the world would be different without Joan of Arc and Our Lady of Guadalupe.
When I talk about Our Lady of Guadalupe, I say it's hard to think of a story where God has so intervened in the life of a nation outside of Joan of Arc. And then, by the way, in the collect or the communion antiphon, in both the Old Rite and the New Rite, I forget which psalm it comes from, mea culpa, but God has not acted thus for any other nation, words to that effect. Yeah.
For the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe?
Yes.
Yeah. And it really is true. Mexico is a blessed nation because of this. Mexico is the heart of the Americas now because she is the patroness of all of the Americas.
Yeah.
She's our patroness. So give us something. Could you start with the historical context of Our Lady of Guadalupe? What's the history that she steps into and interrupts?
Cortez comes in the early part of the 16th century. When does he come onto the Americas? 1524 or something like that. Anyway, and makes his way to Tenochtitlan, conquers the Aztecs with an amphibious assault. All Marines listening will be interested to know. And then shortly thereafter, Spain begins to colonize the region and sends priests. And one of them baptizes a peasant whose name in the Nahuatl language is Talking Eagle, but takes the name Juan Diego. He and his wife are baptized, and you'll remember his wife's name. I won't. I'm sorry. She dies. He's a widower. He's in his early 50s, and he's on his way to Sicilia, maybe? I can't recall. Anyway, he's on his way to catechism class, catechism instruction. And
Maria Lucia?
Very good. I knew it was Italian. And I knew it ended in an A. And a vowel, yeah. So he's on his way to catechism class, and he hears beautiful music up on the top of the Tepeyac Hill, and he walks up there, and Our Lady explains to him what she wants from him. Go tell the bishop, I want a beautiful church here. And Juan Diego says, really, you've got the wrong man for the job. I'm a simple fellow, and I have no business going and talking to the bishop, who is... that's not that you want someone else. He says, no, I know what I'm doing, and go and tell him. His first attempt with the bishop is unsuccessful. She tells him to go back. The bishop asks questions. He's interested. He asks for a sign, and she gives him one. And
I love the part about how she comes down the hill, though.
Oh, that is true. His uncle is not well.
Yeah.
Right, I left that out at mea culpa. So his uncle's not well, and his uncle says, can you get me a priest because I'm going to die? So he goes in search of a priest to give his uncle last rites, and so he avoids Tepeyac Hill because he hasn't done what Our Lady has asked him to do, and he doesn't want to see her. So she comes down the hill and finds him. Come on, Juan Diego. What?
I am the Queen of Heaven. Don't make me come down the hill, Juan Diego.
What are we doing? But her words to him are they're the most consoling words. Anyone who's not feeling consoled or anxious about anything just needs to read this exchange between Our Lady and Juan Diego, because all throughout it she says, I don't understand why. What are you concerned for? I've looked after everything. I'm seeing everything. Are you not in the fold of my arms? Mm. And I can tell you this, Si, because my brother now, Father Paul Check, is the director of the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in La Crosse, Wisconsin, which if you're a listener to this program and you've not been, you need to make a pilgrimage to La Crosse and see this beautiful shrine built by the masterful architect Duncan Stroik, under the care of Bishop Burke, now Cardinal Burke, but Bishop Burke when he was Bishop of La Crosse. And in Spanish, in the narthex of the church, up there where the wall meets the ceiling, I'm sure architects have a word for that space. There are those words: "Are you not in the fold of my arms? Are you not in the fold of my arms?" It's so consoling. So. He gathers the flowers. He thinks the flowers are the sign because they're not native and it's December. And he brings the flowers, but then there's the real miracle, the tilma, which continues to be a miracle now almost 500 years later. In 2031, we'll celebrate 500 years of this. My friends, you need to start getting ready now.
For 2031. That's a good point.
For the 500th anniversary.
Well,
I was talking to Cardinal Burke about this. I don't know if I can tell the story in the air, but I'm going to tell it anyway. I was up in La Crosse, and we were with my brother and helping with his organization chart and things. And I said, everything you're doing now has to be directed towards 2031 for a huge party, a huge celebration. Cardinal Burke, great Midwestern boy, farmer, he says, I think we should have fireworks. I'm like, of course, you should have fireworks.
Well, do you realize that that will be 1 year after the 2000th anniversary of the death and resurrection of the Lord?
Oh, there you go.
So those are going to be a couple of big years. We've got to get working on here at Catholic Answers. We got to get ready.
Yeah.
We've only got 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
But then,
one of the reasons I like the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe is that it is also evidence for the basic justice of the Catholic Church, in that the Catholic Church did not come to Mexico and force people to become Catholic. As a matter of fact, it would have been a crime. It's an ecclesiastical crime to force someone to be baptized.
Yes.
And so they actually were kind of failing at baptizing people in Mexico.
Yes.
Even though they controlled the whole place and there was social advantage to becoming baptized, people were not getting baptized.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Our Lady comes, and then within a few years, 9 million are baptized.
9 million baptized people. Yeah. And then the faith spreads all over the Americas, coming out from there. But not only that, this is the one that always gets me. You know, the people think that the Philippines was evangelized by Spain, but it was not. It was evangelized by Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, indirectly by Spain, but the priests who went came from Mexico. The priests who came to the Southwest here, to where we are right now, they came from Mexico.
Yeah, and and as far as baptisms are concerned, they make much slower progress in the Philippines. They don't have the benefit of an apparition.
Yeah.
And of course the image in the tilma speaks to the indigenous people with the various glyphs. You know, the glyph is the word, pictograph doesn't really describe it exactly, but these unusual patterns in the tilma represent things that were known to the native people, including the one right over Our Lady's womb. It's the only apparition in which she appears pregnant. I feel very confident saying that because I've been saying that for several years and no one's corrected me.
Yeah.
So the only apparition in which she appears pregnant, but that glyph right over her stomach, you know, indicates a deity.
I see. I see. Yeah.
And then scientists keep discovering things, and you know, the reflections in the eyes, and the musical score, and the
position of the stars as far as the date,
the constellation.
Yeah.
It's so funny. So, you know, people always talk about science. We're going to follow the science. Well, if you follow the science, what scientific observation says about the tilma?
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Lady of Guadalupe then, sometimes people will say, well, there was already this Aztec goddess that people were familiar with, and people just kind of replaced one for the other. There was just kind of a substitution that went on there. It's kind of a cultural appropriation.
Yeah, there are probably even some Catholic priests who have made that argument. What I would say is, so the site of the apparitions had been the site of some kind of a goddess temple. That's true, on Tepeyac. I think God writes his revelation to one degree or another. Father Hugh's much better on this than I am, in all of our hearts. And so we see in the pagan world practices of those who have not had the benefit of revelation, and yet in some way or another they point to the fullness of revelation. You see this in Greeks, and I think you certainly see it in the people of the New World. So yeah, so God says, okay, well, this is what it was. This is what it was.
Yeah, that in a certain sense, that temple to Athena that gets changed into a church of Our Lady,
right?
That's not. There's nothing wrong with that, in the sense that one does, in fact, prefigure the other in the heart.
Yeah, that one fulfills the other, if you will.
Yeah, right. Like in a sense, that it's the Lord saying, this is what you were looking for when you had that devotion to Athena, or whoever the Aztec god was.
Yeah, Rome, as you know, Si, when we were there, almost a year ago, or
more than a year
ago, is just really a place where this reality that you and I are discussing right now is driven home, because you see it in the architecture. All of these Christian shrines that stand on the foundations of pagan temples.
Well, thanks for doing an hour with us. I swear it feels like 5 minutes. Jackie's wrong. I'm just going to say that right now. Jackie is wrong.
I'll get her to listen to this episode.
I'm not going to make the mistake of following you again, giving a talk. But thanks very much.
You did great at that talk in Australia. It was very moving. You speak from the heart.
Okay. All right. I'm going to accept that.
It's true.
Someday I would like to speak from knowledge, but what the heck? We're where we are. But thanks very much, because we have so much to be thankful for. It's been a very tough year. But the Lord, the story of the incarnation is moving through history, and it's changing everything, and it's going to keep changing everything.
And how great that we're actors in that story.
Yes. And so I'll say this for your development. And so is everyone who donates to Catholic Answers
Oh,
Live.
amen, they are.
See you next time.